Sketchmate this.
Hey everybody, Sketch back with more Tier in the X-Files, and welcome to Season 5. An odd one to talk about, because there's probably more to discuss regarding the season as a whole, as opposed to individual episodes. At only 20 episodes long, this was the shortest season until the series' ninth and final season, which seems appropriate because this would be the last season filmed in Vancouver. This is essentially an ending to classic Files. There are a number of reasons, predominantly that David Duchovny married Téa Leoni, and he wanted to be, back in California where she was, understandably. That and tensions were getting a little high between him and Gillian Anderson. Gillian's hair, like the moisture in the Vancouver, a lot of rain, as that everything that made Vancouver the ideal place for filming a show like The X-Files, that gave it that atmosphere. They made Gillian's hair naturally frizz up, which was not the style they wanted for Scully. So Anderson would spend a lot of time in the hair and makeup, trailers, and hold up production, which then Duchovny would get frustrated with. Tensions were growing between those two, just as Duchovny would say, familiarity bred contempt. So things were getting rough with them. He wanted to be back in California to be with his new wife. So the decision was made. Well, also, this was season 5. The 5th year was like the end of the initial contract space, and they were worried that the stars would not renew the contracts. So, the whole production was moved down to LA from here on, after season 5. This is the last Vancouver season, and it comes after the movie Fight the Future was filmed the summer before. Everything in this season had to build up to that. Now, Chris Carter, in the behind the scenes, the making of documentary, makes this whole thing about how they had to write season 5 around the movie and how difficult that was. But actually, this season has very little to do with Fight the Future. We will get to Fight the Future. I'm going to plop it in after the end. But there's the two-parter, Patient X and the Red and the Black, does extend the scope regarding like the black oil, etc., which of course plays into, not the microphone, which feeds into stuff that happens in Fight the Future. And yes, the end, is connected in that the X-Files get burnt down and closed, but otherwise not a lot here that has to do with the movie. But as a result, this season is a lot shorter. Actually, because Duchovny and Anderson were still finishing up stuff for the movie, Fox forced the production to start up sooner than they was expecting. So they had to do The Unusual Suspects was the first episode that got filmed ahead of Redux and Redux II. But actually, this season, we'll get more into it, particularly when we get to the Christmas Carol Emily duo. This is very much a Scully season. Even though she's not in 2 of the episodes at all. This is very much, and it feels a lot of closure for Scully. Whereas Mulder, Duchovny does not, or barely appears in 5 out of 20 episodes. The there's two. I mean, yeah, he just barely appears. It's so weird. This is such an odd season to go through. And I know I've waffled on a lot here before we've even got started. But I just want you to get an idea of what we are leading into if you're not so familiar. We are starting out with a two-parter, Redux and Redux II, which are actually parts 2 and 3, leading on, following on from Season 4's Gethsemane cliffhanger. Where Mulder seemingly killed himself. And unfortunately, starting out with Redux. So when I think of the X-Files, I always think of the rule that people have for the odd-numbered Star Trek movies. Everybody says that the odd-numbered Star Trek movies are the ones you should avoid. And for me, personally, the odd-numbered X-Files seasons are the weaker ones. Now, to be fair, seasons 1 and 3 did prove me wrong on that. And I guess we'll see as we go through with, like, season 7 and that. But I've just always thought of them as the weaker ones. And it does not help that once the myth arc starts, the odd-numbered seasons are the ones that always start with these two-parters that continue on from the previous season. Season 8 is the only one that kind of breaks that rule up. But otherwise, yeah, all the odd seasons start with these two-parters where the season opener just drags, and Redux is no exception. Brought to us by Chris Carter, directed by Bob Goodwin. This episode does not capitalize on... So many people tuned into this after the cliffhanger that was the possibility of Mulder killing himself in Gethsemane. But immediately, straight out the gate, we have this scene where you have Mulder all maudling and you're like, it's so sad to watch. But then he gets a phone call from Krishkow who's like, they're watching you. And Mulder conveniently, with no effort whatsoever, looks up at his light and sees this tiny, tiny pinprick, like, spy hole. And realises he's being watched. Like I said, no effort. You know, all the times, I can't believe he's not noticed this before, considering all the times he's had to search his apartment for bugs and stuff. So he goes up to the apartment. This is all in the teaser, I want to point out. So again, this is straight after we've been led to believe that he might have killed himself. He goes up there, shoots the guy, this guy from the DOD, who conveniently, while spying on Mulder, keeps phone records that he can burn, but not completely burn, so that then we have a lead, because otherwise, you know, nobody would have any information. And Mulder shoots him. And this is where the plot holes start to come in. Because we then learn that actually this guy's face was taken off with a shotgun blast. But Mulder didn't have a shotgun. So why anybody believes, aside from Scully's amazing acting, like I say, I still say she deserves an Oscar. And we see her go through, Skinner's not having any of it. He's not buying it for a second. And Scully has to think on her feet to be like, oh, yeah, no, yeah, his face is, you know, unrecognisable, but I saw him in the same clothes earlier. She thinks on the spot. And then later, when we see Holly from Pusher, you know, the one who beat up Skinner. She's like, oh, Dana, I just heard. Oh, I'm so sorry. And Scully's like, moving on. Can you find out these phone records for me? Yeah, we see Mulder immediately. Yeah, that's the teaser. So immediately we've cleared up the fact that Mulder is definitely alive. So no lingering on that fact. And he goes over to Scully's and is just like... And now, to be fair, I mean, one, it's funny to see Mulder sitting in the dark waiting for Scully to start stripping before announcing himself. But actually, I really enjoy this scene between Duchovny and Anderson. As you see them piecing together the fact that there's somebody in the Bureau that has been working against them from the very beginning, since Scully was partnered. And again, it feels like the end of this journey in a way. Like, that they've come so far, and the whole time they have been manipulated, used like pawns, and they've known it at times. But here now, they're seeing how they're being controlled and watched by these people that are in the and I think it's a really fun scene, and especially then when Mulder is just like, if they did this to you, I will not let this stand. And you're just like, oh Mulder, it's adorable. I can't help it. So you then have them going off, and I've always said the best bit about this show is watching Mulder and Scully investigate their own avenues. You know, Scully, who's she's running these tests with this other doctor to prove that there's a conspiracy within the Bureau when she goes for these OPR meetings where she lies about, you know, the ones that we got to see over and over again in Gethsemane. We get to see them again here. Yay! With a little bit of progression, because Scully, like I say, is super sus of Skinner. It's kind of sad to see that he's the one that they jump to. Scully is all like, he's been there from the start, and you're like, well, technically Skinner didn't turn up until the end of season 1. But okay. So you then have to watch her. She's testing the chimera cells that were found in the ice core against her cancer cells. And this is where we really learn the depth of like the alien DNA that's a part of her. Chris Carter, we knew this long before season 10. Just because maybe you're letting people know, I don't know. But yeah, it was handled way better here. So it's fun to see Scully investigating the science side of things. She's all like, you know, being on the X-Files has tested my science, has tested my faith and stuff. But when I need it, science is here for me to find the proof and the truth to present. So it's fun to watch her. And meanwhile, you're seeing Mulder with Michael Krishkow at the DOD, because he's got this, is it Scott Osselhoff or something? The guy that he killed up in the apartment above him. I would like to say as well, apparently nobody was living in Mulder's apartment building that night, because somehow Mulder was able to drag that body. I just have in my head this image of Mulder dragging this body, leaving no blood stains, to the elevator, down a level, and then back through to his apartment. I'm sure he just put him in a like a fireman's hold or something. But yeah, I just have this image of him trying to lug this body along. But apparently nobody heard the gunshots, and nobody came out to check, and then spotted Mulder carrying this body down to his apartment. So yeah, apparently nobody was living there that day. But yeah, he's got this key card that gives him higher access at the DOD than Michael Krishkow. So Krishkow is hoping that Mulder can find... he's helping because he wants help for his son, who is sick. But it's interesting that, you know, he says, I can give... That key card can give you the thing you want the most. And you would think that would be Samantha. Do you remember when she was a part of this show? I don't think we've seen her, you know, I don't think we've remembered she existed since Paper Hearts? Oh no, Demons. No, Demons. Yeah, this show has kind of forgotten that she is even a thing. We'll get more to that in Redux II. But, yeah, it's not, you know, finding any kind of information about what has happened to Samantha Wright. No. The thing Mulder wants the most is the cure for Scully's cancer. You're like, oh, just the gooiness that you feel inside. great aspects here. There is so much interesting mixed in then, where you're seeing CSM, who believes that Mulder is dead, meeting up with the First Elder at this... What is it? I get that Manicured Man likes horses, but apparently going and watching horses race and stuff is part of the Syndicate's go-to, because First Elder is just there watching some horse racing as well, and you're like, okay, it's weird. Is this like... I chucked about it actually in my Freddy FR07 thing. Apparently Ascot is known for its, moustache twirling villains hanging out. But apparently it happens in America as well. But yeah, they totally believe that Mulder's dead, and you later see Smoking Man go to Mulder's apartment genuinely looking upset, and it's fascinating to see how, while Skinner completely doesn't believe it, Scully knows. It's interesting to see how it affects other parts of this world, specifically the Syndicate. But while there's all these interesting aspects here, the writing is tedious, and basically this is monologuing the episode. Now, of course, monologuing Chris Carter is known for. It's one of his staples, especially in his Myth Arc episodes. But here, it's just awful. Poor John Finn, who played Michael Krishkow, apparently, according to, Bob Goodwin, he had a script that was, as thick as the Yellow Pages. And I know a lot of it is in voiceover, but it just goes on and on, while all this stock footage of military aircraft and newspaper clippings about Roswell and stuff like that gets shown, and you're just like... And you have to wonder, surely Mulder has been faced by all of this logical explanations for alien stories before. He must have seen these, dealt with these, debunked them, whatever, over and over again. I know he's against the government at this point, and he's believing that about all these conspiracies and stuff. But it is frustrating that as Krishkow reels off these explanations and that, Mulder's like, yeah. Come on, tell me more. I'm totally into this. Tell me more. How? I've totally never heard these explanations before. It's really frustrating, and it just goes on and on. And you're sat, as they're walking along through these long hallways with barely anybody, any employees walking around. And you're just sat there going, can we get back to Scully's part, please? I mean, her monologues weren't much more interesting, but it was fun to see her, going up against Skinner and being like, they did this to me, why are you following me, and stuff like that. I love those scenes. But yeah, there's just a lot here that doesn't work. It's just frustrating, and it plods, and it feels like... Sorry, not the microphone. And it feels like, just a waypoint between Gethsemane and Redux II. So I am gonna have to put this in B. It's very middle of the road. It's not the worst thing. And like I say, there are a lot of aspects here that are fascinating. If they had been written better, would have made this episode maybe an A. But yeah, I'm going to have to put it in B, because it's just frustrating. And like I say, we're then seeing the OPR meetings again and stuff like that, and you're just like... So yeah, a lot of repetition and a lot of frustration. But it's fascinating, because then we have Redux II, which is so different. If you had told me Redux II was written by Frank Spotnitz, I would not have debated that whatsoever. The fact that this is written by Chris Carter as well, directed by Kim Manners, it's interesting. It feels so different. It feels like all the effort was put into Redux 2. And I don't know if it's because it finally progresses the story past a lot of that other stuff. Past the Krishkal barely appears here. We find out actually his son died. Everybody's, Section Chief Blevins and that are all asking questions about Krishkal, and he has a meeting. But, we then find out that his son died, clearly because he's helping out Mulder and Scully and stuff. But yeah, we start out where, because Scully collapsed at the OPR meeting, and Skinner was there to catch her, and she still believes that he's sus. But she collapses, and Mulder immediately, we start out this episode with Mulder trying to track her down. Well, somebody tell me where Dana Scully is, and everybody's like, calm down, and he's like, I will calm down where you tell me where she is. And you're just like, yes, so much yes, that passion that he has, it's so adorable. And I think that's what I love about these episodes, as we watch the partnership just, it's so forged, kind of thing. And Skinner's like, you're supposed to be dead. And Mulder's like, I'm only half dead. And you're like, oh, it's so beautiful. Combine that with not only the emotional stakes that are here, just the emotional storytelling, not only from Mulder as he desperately seeks a cure for Scully. He thought he had it with this little vial, except it turned out that because he has this meeting with Smoking Man, who is trying to lure him to the dark side. And you have to wonder why Smoking Man didn't do this a lot sooner. It's taken him, since 7 years essentially, or even longer. He could have lured Mulder in, but no. He waits until now. He's playing the long game. He's like, I can offer you some Manfa, and I can offer you a cure for Scully. And Mulder's just like, no. Because we have this scene where Megan Leach turns up again. It's always good to see her back as Samantha. But we have this one scene in the whole episode. I've moved away from... We'll get back to talking about the emotional stuff. We have this one scene where Smoking Man presents a grown Samantha to Mulder. And you just have to wonder if either it's the bounty hunter posing as Samantha, or if they just have this, conveyor belt of Samantha clones waiting on hand. Because we know all the ones in, the Endgame Colony duo got killed. So we know there aren't the Samanthas that are working, to against the Syndicate and that. So you just have to wonder if there's these prepped Samanthas with this story to tell Mulder should they meet up. I can just imagine, right, bring out clone number 420. Right, this is the story you will tell Fox if, it's just like... And it just goes nowhere. It doesn't get brought up again. When Smoking Man is like, I gave you Samantha, and Mulder's like, what did you do? You showed me her and then took her away. And if Scully dies, I will kill you. I am not joining the dark side. It's interesting to watch we've got that intrigue going on, and wondering if Mulder, he's been offered deals by Blevins to name Skinner as the shooter, because they're trying to pin it on him. And we find out later that actually Chief Section Blevins, who assigned Scully to the X-Files, and his assistant guy, who I don't think ever had a name, turns out they're the inside people. And I love it when Mulder later realized, he names Blevins, and he didn't even realize he was going to name Blevins, but he's just like, Section Chief Blevins is the man I was going to name. He never believes it's Skinner, and I just love that about this unit. This whole Skinner, Mulder, Scully unit, that they stand by each other. We see it time and time again. Scully is in a place where she does not trust Skinner, but it's interesting to see how that relationship between those people works, especially because we have seen Skinner on the dark side. And the fact that, the whole time Scully is like, so Mulder doesn't get in trouble. She's like, name me as the shooter. And Mulder's just like, no, I won't do that. Because, for you have to believe the lie if you're going to live it and stuff like that. And it's just, there's so much intrigue with those side of things as you're trying to put in the pieces, and you should know it. The first time I watched this, I didn't even consider Blevins. I don't know if it's because Blevins is not a character that has really appeared since season 1. So I don't know if it's because I just forgot he existed or what. But the first time I watched this episode, I just remember being, wait, what? Really? Wow. I mean, obviously I was happy it wasn't Skinner. But yeah, you've got so much intrigue going on there. And then you've got the emotional story, bringing in the Scully family, sans Charlie, because, as we all know, Charlie is imaginary. I don't care what season 10 says, because season 10 and 11 didn't happen. What are you talking about? What are these extra seasons you talk about? Yeah, Bill, Tara doesn't turn up until Emily Christmas Carol. But yeah, Bill and Maggie Scully are there. Scully finally turns back to her faith, so Father McHugh is there to help. But you watch the family unit, you've got the emotional connection there, you've got Mulder coming in to see Scully. I don't know where all this kissing comes from, honestly. If, like I say, Frank Spotness writing this would have understood. Chris Carter, I don't know if it's Kim Manners that directed all the kissing or what, but it's so insane because there is no hesitation on Mulder's part, no confusion on Scully's part when Mulder's coming in, kissing her on the cheek straight away, time and time again, all this hand-holding. Oh, there is so much good Mulder Scully awesomeness here. It makes my heart just sing and cry at the same time. The fact that Scully's only confusion is, oh, what are you doing here? We've kept up this facade of you being dead. And he's like, yeah, whatever. Everybody knows I'm alive now. So, and the fact that he goes to her when he gets offered this deal by Blevins, to name Skinner, and Mulder's like, I'm not going to name Skinner. And Scully's like, just name me. And he's like, no. And she's like, well, why are you here if you've made up your decision? And he's like, because I knew you would talk me out of it if I was wrong. And you're like, oh. There's so much about this episode. It's beautiful. Mix all this stuff with then the amazing score by Mark Snow. Especially, is it called Fix It for Good, I think it is? That the beautiful piano song. Oh, it's up there with Scully's theme from season 8, and I don't remember the name of the piece that plays during the surgery in I Want to Believe. Oh, it's just beautiful. All of these elements come together, and the stakes that you're just like, you're pretty sure Scully's not going to die, but you're like, how is this going to work? And even then, when they implant the chip back into Scully's neck, the fact that everybody, the doctor, Bill Scully is like, back off and stuff like that. Bill Scully, as usual, being a prick. Although it is interesting to think, because Bill has had so much dealing with Dana, and saying, why are you putting so much effort into this Mulder guy and stuff like that. This is actually Bill and Mulder's first meeting. Mulder's like, hi, I'm Mulder, I'm sorry. And Bill's like, just let her die in peace. And you can kind of understand it as the eldest brother and stuff like that. But yeah, Bill's just a dick. But yeah, you've got so much of this stuff with the family interactions and the intrigue and, the fact that Scully willingly puts that chip in her neck, even though everybody is saying, there's no science, whatever. But she trusts Mulder's judgment and logic that taking out the chip is what gave her the cancer. Maybe putting it in will help. This is just, there are so many elements here that work. And like I say, I do have to wonder if Chris Carter put more effort into writing this episode than the first part. It's just an excellent end to this trilogy. It's not a perfect episode, but I'm going to have to put it up in S. I just enjoy it. It makes me so sad. But the character interactions and the intrigue just make it so engaging. So yeah, I'm going to put it in S. I was considering A, but no, let's go with that. And let's move on, because I've waffled plenty enough about those episodes. On to the unusual suspects. As I said, this was the first episode written, first episode in production while David and Gillian were finishing up on Fight the Future. Brought to us by Vince Gilligan. Apparently he had an idea for something else regarding nanotechnology or something, according to Wikipedia. But then, yeah, he was asked to change it into this origin story for the Lone Gunman. Apparently they decided to not go with a Skinner-centric episode for the third season in a row. And I think it's about time that the Gunman got their gunman-centric episode. It is funny, though, that Dean Haglund said on the behind-the-scenes making of the season documentary, he said when they said they wanted him on the show, he was just like, yeah, just I think he was, I think he said he was on tour at the time. He was just like, yeah, just fax it to me. And he was expecting like 2 pages through, and he had to pay for it to be printed out at the hotel. Except then, like, this 70-page script comes through, and he's like, oh, okay. Apparently it cost him money, that episode. But, yeah, it's about time these guys got their due. And Scully's not here at all. Mulder is barely here. Although he turns up wearing, because apparently David Duchovny forgot to take his wedding ring off. And you're just like, okay, let's just avoid it. It is then weird when later on they're looking up Mulder, and it clearly says on his FBI file that he's single. Now I have heard, I don't know if I read it in a fan fiction or if it was in one of those anthology books where there was a prequel story. There's a theory that he would wear a wedding ring just to stop people annoying him while he was in like profiler mode and stuff like that. I don't know. It's just odd that they didn't have that. Clearly they didn't notice it or whatever while writing it. The problem is they double down on it completely. They clearly have his FBI file saying he's single, but then in Travelers he's wearing the ring again. So that is a frustrating thing that they were like, let's double down on it, even though we also show his file in Kill Switch, which doesn't show him as divorced or that. It still shows him as just single. But Mulder is barely here, and we get to watch this is not only an origin story for the Gunman, it's also technically a crossover episode. Because it crosses over with Homicide: Life on the Streets, with Detective Munch out of that series. Now, I never watched that series. I don't know how. I mean, it's just the character, as far as I know, that has come over. Now, that must have been fun, because crossovers now, we see them a lot, but back then I don't think they were quite as common. And obviously the X-Files is supposed to be realistic and stuff, so I can imagine that being quite weird if you're a fan of both the shows and then this character turns up. So So yeah, you have this as Byers is relaying this story of how Sudan Medeski walked into his life. Medeski, played by Signe Coleman, is this very femme fatale. It's odd that she chooses Byers. Apparently she sees him and thinks, one, he's a bit tasty, and two, he looks like I could totally manipulate him. And you're like, okay, because he's this narc that like works for the FCC, and they're at this convention, like a technology convention or whatever, and she's gone there hoping to hack into her FBI file, and she uses Byers, and he's like, I don't know how to hack in as much as you need, but I know some people that might. And so Frohickey and Langley, so you've got him working for the FCC, you've got Frohickey and Langley, who are these warring cable providers that absolutely hate each other, but they get sucked in and they absolutely hate Byers, but Byers goes to them for help, and they get sucked in, and then these three just get drawn together in this conspiracy, as they then find out there's something very blood about this, where you find out that there's this chemical that can create paranoia that's going to be tested on the American people, and you're like, oh, we're going back that territory. I know that's the kind of thing that this show deals in the best, those kind of paranoia conspiracies and stuff. But yeah, it is a little retready ish. But yeah, the Medeski is trying to expose this and stuff like that, and yet these guys get sucked in. And they then find out, that Mulder isn't really her ex. It's just that there's this FBI file on her. And there's just a lot of intrigue here. There's also this amazing shot. This was directed by Kim Manners, and I assume Vince Gilligan was inspired. I don't know if he wrote it in his script or this is just something he was inspired by, because you cannot help but see this scene of Frohickey and Byers out in this back corridor with this exit sign in the foreground, complete with buzzing, and not think of the amazing scene in Better Call Saul, the episode Chicanery. And then the final episode of that whole show also has a callback shot with that exit sign. You can't help but think of that. So I do have to wonder if Vince Gilligan took that and used it as his inspiration when he did Better Call Saul. But it's fun to think of just, this is the exit point where, Byers and Frohickey go from their normal lives and exit out into this world of absolute insanity. It's there's a lot of intrigue here. And I think it's just fun seeing, naked Mulder is always fun to see as he's laying there screaming at the top of his lungs after being sprayed by this stuff. And it's just interesting as well. So apparently, Vince Gilligan went over to John Scheiben's house and was like, he could not figure out how, why the gunmen don't get killed at the end by these men in black kind of thing. And then they were like, X, let's put X there. He's trying to help Mulder. And it's really odd because I never really think of X being a part of Mulder's life back then. I mean, obviously he could have been and stuff, but there's is it Agent of Chaos, I think the name of the book is? There were these two prequel story books released, one for Mulder and one for Scully, and they're books I want to bring up and talk about at some point. But it's interesting because that one has X watching over Mulder. Now I know that was written after this episode aired and stuff like that, but it's interesting, this idea that X has been, because when you think of X, you just think of, like, Deep Throat was there first, and Deep Throat was kind of X's mentor, and X was looking out for Mulder, because we always got that impression that was why X was there, looking out for Mulder, because of Deep Throat. Where in actual fact, it turns out he might have been there longer. So that's a really interesting. I don't necessarily. It feels a little forced as a result for me personally. But I still think this is a fun episode. It's fun to see how Mulder met up with the gunman and kind of went from there, and how they came together as people that were very, who end up with this very tight-knit group, who just absolutely were actually more separate from each other than you would have thought. I think it's just a fun episode. I don't think it's perfect by any means. I'm going to put it in A. It's not one I come back to often. But it's enjoyable. And I think it's worth your time. And as an origin story, it could have done a lot worse. So yeah, I'm going to put that in A. Moving on to Detour, which, technically is the first episode for Mulder and Scully after Scully's remission. Cancer's gone into remission. And that really shows just like the interactions between Mulder and Scully here. If you had told me this episode, it's funny because aside from the shippiness here, if you had told me that Chris Carter, whereas say Redux II, I would have thought Frank Spotnitz had written, this one I would have thought Chris Carter had written, because it feels very much like Darkness Falls. It's essentially season 5's environmental episode. But in fact, it's written by Frank Spotnitz. Like I say, the shippiness here, you can definitely tell. But it makes sense because you can see Scully coming out of her shell. She's just gotten through this. Mulder has been there for her and fought for her the whole time. She's super, he makes these jokes. It's very innuendo. Not innuendo, I mean, there's a little innuendo, but you can see him being a lot more, relaxed with her. And as a result, they're in this car on this route to a FBI team building seminar, with these other two anally retentive agents, Stone Cipher and Kinsley, who are super hyped to go on this team building course. And I do have to wonder if they are at it like bunnies when nobody's looking. God, sorry. I don't know why I said that, and now that's put a gross image in my head. But you do have to wonder. They are super tight. But they're exceptionally eager to go to this team building seminar. And Mulder and Scully, I assume, who have been forced to carpool with these agents, probably by Skinner. I don't know why Skinner felt the need to punish them after what has just happened. But they're forced into this car, and Mulder's like, as they're going on, Mulder's just like, kill me now, leaning into Scully. And Scully's smiling, and he makes other jokes about, getting constipation when it's time to go on these seminars and stuff, and Scully's smiling and trying not to laugh, and you're just like, who is this person? But you do have to bear in mind, if you just skip Unusual Suspects, to think of what they've just gone through. It's really interesting to see. But the detour of this episode is, it turns out, unfortunately, the X-file of this episode is not all that interesting. It turns out that there's these two guys living out in the woods, who have the ability to camouflage themselves, like go invisible and stuff. Except for their red glowing eyes, which are a little obvious. But they're living out there and they're killing humans because of construction encroachment on their land. And you're like, okay. And it. I mean, yes, the idea of being killed by something you can't see is creepy, but it's just not that memorable. I don't know what it is. It's an episode that goes out in the forest. It takes advantage of the Vancouver forest. It's one of the last episodes that does before we move on to LA. But yeah, it's just not all that interesting. The only thing to take away from this episode is easily the character interactions between Mulder and Scully predominantly. Yes, you've got this Michelle Fazekas, however you pronounce it, who works for the park, who's investigating this missing hunter. After a surveyor team has also gone missing. But I don't find her all that interesting. She's just all stuck up, and I don't know if they picked a red-headed actress on purpose while Scully is being super flirty with Mulder. And while he's trying to avoid it, because he's all eager to do innuendo, but the second Scully turns up at his hotel room, and he's just like, with wine and cheese. And Mulder is like, "Ooh, party," and then it's all like, there's so much here where Scully is like, do I need to tell them that you won't? Do I need to tell them that you won't be going to the seminar? And then when she turns up later, she's like, "Seeing as you won't be making it," I'm like, "But you're not going either, Scully. It's not like she went off with the other agents. They didn't just leave Mulder behind." So is Scully, like, when she refers to you, as in Mulder, does she mean, like, wherever Mulder is her? So basically, because we won't make it, and you're like, I don't know if that's adorable or a little odd. But it is, she turns up, and Mulder clearly is eager, but then is like, I need to back off. I mean, as we've said before, throw a woman at Mulder and immediately he's like, he doesn't know what to do. He panics. He looks for any excuse to leave. I gotta go check something. I'll be back. We'll have sex later. He talks about building the pile of furniture. There's just so much fun here with their interactions. Of course, this is the episode where we get Scully. We have an injured Mulder, and they're trapped out in the woods, and Scully sings "Joy to the World" to him. And you know what? The discussion before is odd. I'm completely baffled by the Betty Rubble discussion, and I don't know if it's to show as well that Mulder and Scully just do not know how to converse about anything besides work. But I'm just like, okay. But the scene where, they're just out in the woods and Scully's trying to protect Mulder and stuff like that. It's lovely. It's beautiful. And then when you see them, honestly, the logic these two have is, Scully falls down in a hole, and I don't know how these two managed to survive the whole night without dying. Bearing in mind how quickly Michelle and this other guy, Jeff, got swiped by these invisible people. Somehow they managed to survive the whole night, even though shooting them has proven to be pointless. Only then do they swipe Scully, who again falls but doesn't die or go quiet like everybody else has. And then Mulder, thinking that he's at risk, throws himself down into the same hole. And then they build a pile of bodies. If it wasn't for the annoying Stonecipher and Kinsley coming to the rescue, these two who just decided not to go, I know there was like a roadblock, but I would have thought that would have cleared at some point. Because they just didn't bother to sod it off. There's just a lot of good Mulder Scully moments here, but otherwise, the episode is just, Scully's okay. Yeah, I don't know. This is a tough one. I do enjoy it. It's got a lot of good atmosphere. I don't think it's a good episode, but I can't help but want to put it in A, to be honest. That's a tough one. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I can understand why people will put it in B, and the temptation is strong. It's just a bit, But I'm going to put it in A, because I love the Mulder and Scully interactions so much. And it's got so much promise. It's just a shame that the monsters are actually... And there's no closure at the end. They're still about hanging out in... You're given the impression that they're going after Scully, but actually they're holding out in Mulder. And I will like to say, I do love Scully just going straight into Mulder's room and picking up and packing away his stuff. You can tell that that's not the first time that has happened. Yeah, I'm going to put it in A. Yeah, so they were hanging out in Mulder's room instead. So everybody thought, oh no, they saw Scully as the alpha. But actually they were in Mulder's room, so I don't know. But, yeah, no, I'm going to put that in A because I do enjoy it. It's just one that I enjoy coming back to, even though it's one of those ones you watch if your brain is shut off, I guess. But from that, we go on to... Postmodern Prometheus. Oh. Oh, God. Written and directed by Chris Carter. This is a tough one to talk about. Let's talk about this without talking about the story first, shall we? Because this is Carter's homage to the classic James Whale Frankenstein movies. And is shot in black and white to give that whole atmosphere and feeling. And it really digs in, these characters that are caricatures. It starts out even, with a comic book opening. So immediately you're drawn into the idea that this isn't a real story, that it's a fantasy, helped along by Mark Snow's whimsical music. So maybe thinking about the story too much when this is just seen as a fantastical story is probably unfair, but again, we will get to my issues with the story in a minute. Because yeah, we're starting out following this investigation where Sinead Berkowitz, who was originally supposed to have been played by Roseanne Barr. She'd wanted to be on the show, and they wanted a role for her, and Carter wanted her as this character, except she wasn't available when the time came to film. So instead they had to get somebody else. And I think the actress who plays Sinead is fine, and I could see where the Roseanne-ishness would come in. But I'm kind of, especially now, this wouldn't have dated, doesn't date particularly well as it is, but yeah, would not have aged too well. But yeah, no, so you've got this Sinead who has written to Mulder after, because somebody was on the Jerry Springer show mentioned him. And her story is that she is pregnant even though she's had a tubal ligation. And yeah, this is how Mulder and Scully get involved, and it's just amazingly shot. There's these wide angles and kind of low down angles looking up. There's a lot that takes a lot of inspiration from those classic kind of Universal monster movies and stuff like that. You have this character, Dr. Polidori, played by I think it's John O'Hurley or something. I could be wrong. I'll put the name up on the screen. He just is so, yes, I do it because I can. It's just perfectly played. There is amazing cinematography here. Apparently the guy playing Izzy was not an actor. He was just some wise ass that Chris Carter met and was like, you are perfect for this character that I've got in mind. But apparently as a result, because he wasn't an actor, he didn't have the discipline and was a nightmare to direct, just doing his own thing and that. And I think that's what really comes across in the character. So I guess it worked out, but I guess directing for... Because I've always thought Chris Carter, especially watching this episode, Chris Carter I've always considered a much better director than necessarily writer. Sometimes some editing can be a little off-putting, but otherwise, yeah, I've always considered him a better director. But I think everything here just really works visually and storytelling-wise. You have this character, the Great Mutato, played by Chris Owens, who would later be Jeffrey Spender, who has already been young smoking man in the series. Apparently he was in makeup for like 5 hours having this prosthetic put on, which apparently I did not know until watching this, listening to Carter's commentary on this episode. Yes, this is how much effort I put into these videos, people. I suffered by watching this with Chris Carter's commentary on. You should all bow before me and my suffering. Sorry, I'm joking, obviously. Whenever I listen to Chris Carter talk about stuff, I just want to punch him in the face. It does not help. He feels... Now, there's being proud, and then there's just... In the one commentary, he mentions about how this episode was nominated for 7 Emmys. 3 times. He does not shut up about it. This is one of his favourite episodes. And David Duchovny has said he thinks this is one of the best episodes the show ever put out. And I think if you're just judging this from a visual and, character interaction standpoint, it's really fun to watch. It's super campy. And yeah, it's whimsical and just apparently the Great Mutato. I was going to say, apparently Chris Owens was in makeup for 5 hours. What I did not realise until listening to the commentary, I do get back to what I was going to say eventually sometimes, is basically, apparently, yeah, he was in the makeup chair for like 5 hours and was, Chris Carter said, I'm pretty sure he was happy to never play that character again. Except then they have Chris Owens have all that prosthetics on him when he's burned and scarred Jeffrey Spender in season 9. So clearly somebody just wanted to punish him that day. Yeah, apparently the second face on this prosthetic is actually articulated. Now, Carter said he never found a way to properly shoot it so that you could see that the mouth and the eye are articulated, that they do move, because of the shadows and, obviously the black and white kind of thing. And I zoomed in, you can see the eye moving, but I don't think I ever saw the mouth moving. So that was kind of sad that the effort that was put in there to make this thing was never fully visible. But I think it's an interesting design. And I love the voice that Owens puts on, to be that kind of raspy because the smoke has affected him, which is hilarious when you think about it, because he's Jeff Spender and he previously played young smoking man, who would have, been smoking a lot. So you're like, wait, were you affected by the smoke? It's just funny to think about. Just thinking of those characters, the interactions, I think it's an excellent episode. You can't help but see the tent over the house and not think of wonder if Vince Gilligan took inspiration when he then had the extermination tents in Breaking Bad, even though they're a different color. Apparently they were red and white, the ones that they used, whereas the ones in Breaking Bad are green and yellow. But yeah, it's funny there's just so much interesting elements here. Cher was approached. She apparently voiced interest in being on the show. But now, apparently the reason why she's not in this episode in the end is because of clashing schedules. But I remember seeing, I don't know if on an interview, I don't remember if it was on the DVD sets or whatever. I remember her saying that originally she wasn't interested because it was such a small part that it was just her singing kind of thing. But then she got talked into it, but then the schedules clashed. But I think that's kind of sad that she wasn't interested when it wasn't a bigger part. But yeah, I mean, and also the dance scene at the end between Mulder and Scully. Apparently David and Gillian improv'd that. And that doesn't surprise me one bit. Of course they look for any excuse to dance together. And again, I get that it's supposed to be this happy ending, you know, because they're not happy with how the story ends, and they're like, get the writer in. But then we get to the actual crux of the story. People are going to say I'm overthinking this. But basically, Chris Carter saw what Vince Gilligan did in Small Potatoes and was like, hold my beer. He listened to Eddie Van Blunt say, well, if people aren't getting hurt and they're getting what they want, why does it matter how they got pregnant? So the story is that Dr. Polidori, who loves to play with genetics because he can, you know, because, you know, the man who decides that it's a good idea to make legs come out of a fly's mouth, because why not? He genetically made this great mutato, who I was going to say before. Apparently, the name Chris Carter had come up with it, but then he saw found out that the Simpsons had used the character in one of their Treehouse of Horror. They'd named one of their Treehouse of Horror characters Mutato or something. So Chris Carter had to ask them for permission to borrow the name. And they allowed it. But yeah, so Mutato was created, but he was lonely and he was sad. So Polidori's dad, wanting to create a mate, very Bride of Frankensteinish, a mate or just a friend, for Mutato, I'm going to say Mutato now, for Mutato, he reads up some science books, much like Scully Googling for surgery. He looks up in genetics books, how to, and he creates in petri dishes some, you know, DNA and stuff, and then Mutato goes around these houses and I can't even scientifically impregnates the women of the town. Oh, but he's a sympathetic character. Oh, but he just wants company. No! 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 I don't care. You know what? It does not help. To be fair, this is coming from a place post Chris Carter Reddit Ask Me Anything, where he insists that, you know, scientifically impregnating someone is not rape. even if they don't know about it, even if it's against their will. It does not help. But the fact, if you listen to his commentary, which again, I remind you, made me want to punch him in the face. Actually, it wasn't that bad, except for when he said about how he loved the idea of termite tents and how, you don't know what's going on inside and there's, it's creepy and stuff like that. But he wanted to use that idea in a comedic way. A comedic way. People are being impregnated. They're being, even worse, they're not just being impregnated. Oh, no. They're being drugged with this smoke that gets put, they come up with some, horse sedative, skillet. You put it on the skillet and it burns and creates this smoke. They get drugged and knocked out and then impregnated. But it turns out that all these humans that have been mixed with animal DNA have turned out absolutely fine. Okay, normal looking. A little quirky, but apparently they have slight animal traits. Kind of. Just do their hair differently and stuff, or the journalist, give her with the neck and for chicken, I can't. Seriously. The idea that it's just because then it turns out that Polidori's wife, who is, completely ignored, she's just there for his pleasure. She wants a child, to maybe keep her company when Polidori's away. Because she wants a child, that must make it okay. She hears she might be pregnant, and yay! No, Chris Carter, no. I'm sorry, I don't care how much people think I'm overthinking this. I don't care. The fact then as well that you have the ending where Mulder doesn't like the idea that the monster is being arrested and stuff like that. Mulder's like, no, I want a happy ending for the monster. The monster that has been going around and medically impregnating people. You know what? At least in Emily later on, the Scheiben, Spotnitz and Gilligan properly word it as medical rapists. That's essentially what he is. I'm sorry. It frustrates me. And the fact that this is, people were kicking off, regarding the whole enemy, my struggle free, I hate you all for making me think of that. The fact that people were kicking off then about stuff, and it's like, this is clearly something that has been in Chris Carter's mind for a long, long time. William was not the first. That Chris Carter was totally fine with just impregnating people against their will. Clearly, Sinead did not want any more children. The fact that she'd had a tubal ligation. Not everybody just wanted a child, regardless of how they got it. I'm sorry, it frustrates me. But, that all said, this is genuinely a fun episode otherwise. If you do not think of the story and its problems, it is beautifully shot, undeniably so. It is, you see that image of the townsfolk led by Polidori going along with lit flame torches. And you can't help but think of, Carter says about how Polidori's speech is pretty much, word for word, what gets said in the Frankenstein movie. But I can't help but see it and not think of Gaston leading the townsfolk in Beauty and the animated Beauty and the Beast. I'm just waiting for him to go, kill the beast! It's just beautifully shot and well acted. I mean, for what it is, like I say, it's campy as all hell. This is one of those ones, sometimes I come back to it, sometimes I don't. And again, I think hindsight, just thinking of the story, it's frustrating. It's much like Small Potatoes. You shouldn't like it, but you can't help but like it. I think it's the whimsy. I guess it's some of the. It's just, yeah. I don't know. It's a problematic one. If it was down to the issues in the story, I would probably easily put it B or C. I hate myself so much right now. I gotta put it in A. I gotta put it in A. It's 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 entertaining and it's silly and its writer is an issue, but I get why people like it. But I absolutely people would put it lower. I don't know a lot of people that would put it lower. That's the funniest thing. But if I'm thinking about it story wise, it's got a serious issue. But I can't deny it's what it does do. It does well. What it does well, it does exceptionally well. Um, Going on from there though, we go to Christmas Carol. Very Scully centric episode. Mulder literally pops up once to go hello into a phone when Scully who gets his phone call that might be from Melissa from Beyond the Grave. That aspect never gets answered. That is a hanging thread. We are left wondering, is Scully just psychic? Did she get a message from Beyond the Grave? Or what? It's never... She gets a couple of phone calls that lead her to the Sim household, where it turns out that there's this child that Scully suspects due to a picture of Melissa when she was little. Scully suspects that she might be Melissa's child, especially when she finds out that Emily is adopted. And that would make sense, considering she gets his phone call supposedly from Melissa. So, we've had, Scully fighting the cancer and stuff. And now we have this very personal story, her journey of wanting to be a mother. And being attached to this child whose adoptive mother had supposedly committed suicide, but in actual fact was murdered. And Scully helps this Detective Kresge, played by John Piper Ferguson, who actually guest starred as Paul in Emasculata back in season 2. So it's funny to see him all clean shaven here. Yeah, so Detective Kresge is just like, yeah, no, it was a suicide, whatever. I don't know what you're doing here. I didn't call you in. And she's just like, I'm just holidaying. She's there in San Diego with her family because they've gone to Bill's house for Christmas, she and Maggie. And this is the first time, actually, that we discover Scully tells Maggie that she can't conceive children because of what happened to her, that she's been left barren. And later on in Emily, we find out that Mulder is just like, Scully's known for some time that she can't conceive. And you're like, he was the first person. The fact that it's taken until now for poor Maggie to find out, especially after the whole Memento Mori not knowing about the cancer thing straight away. This poor woman is just the last in the loop. She gets random calls from Mulder about Dana going missing. And now her own daughter won't tell her important stuff like, I have a life-threatening disease. I'm not able to give you any grandchildren. It's fine, let's just carry on. That poor woman. It's bad enough she gets used as, surrogate mother for William in season 9. But yet they've gone to Bill's. And it's so funny because Bill's there, giving her a lift and stuff like that. And he's just like, what is going on? And Scully's just so dismissive as she keeps going off to this house to investigate. And we get these flashbacks that show, like, young Scully, an upsetting young Scully. Baby Scully apparently had a rabbit and kept it in a toolbox that's then, like, piled on top of with heavy books so the rabbit does not escape. Now, to be fair, she was tiny and she was trying to avoid Bill being the... It's nice to see that Bill was a dick even when he was younger. Yet Scully, little Dana, has this rabbit that she's kept in this toolbox. And somehow it's then died. Well, I mean, obviously it died. I'm more confused how the maggots got in there. But okay. I don't know if that's just part of her dream or if that actually happened. And if that actually happens, then I'm super upset. But these flashbacks are used to give us, like, show Scully's fear of death. And I don't know, they're interesting because they give us more depth to Scully. You know, we've had prequel stories for Mulder. And a lot of, like, I mean, we've had Unusual Suspects. We'll have Travelers later in the season. It's interesting to see these bits, but for Scully, we don't have anything like that. So to get these flashbacks to show younger Scully and what led her to this point and stuff is interesting. But especially then when you have, it's so good to see Melinda McGraw back as Melissa when they have this scene together before Scully joins Quantico. It's interesting to see, you know, where Melissa's just like, you don't know who you're going to meet, who's going to change your life and whose life you're going to change and stuff like that. And it's good to see, because Melinda McGraw and Gillian Anderson have this great sisterly chemistry. So I wish we'd had more of that, but it's so good to have her back. But it's interesting watching because back in Dod Calm, Scully said that after her abduction and, you know, the resulting coma and stuff, she didn't have a fear of death.
We have nothing to fear when it's over.
But then this episode is like, oh no, she has this fear of death. She speaks with this social worker and they're like, we don't think you're fit. And Scully's, because of your job and that. And Scully's like, look, I've been since, you know, I've never gotten close to people due to this fear of death and stuff like that. And I think we've seen that in Detour, her coming out of her shell and trying to get closer to people. But it just doesn't gel with what she said earlier in season 2. And I don't know if it's just, obviously, you know, these 2 episodes are written by Vince Gilligan, John Scheiben, and Frank Spotnitz. The Holy Trinity. And I don't know if it's just they didn't remember her saying that back in .com or what. I can't remember who wrote .com, actually, off the top of my head. For some reason, I'm pretty sure that was a Chris Carter one. But I could be wrong. I don't think it was. But anyway, the point is, they clearly just didn't know or whatever. Because then they use it so much as a crux here as she's doing this investigating. But yeah, I don't know. It feels a little off. But it is interesting to see these flashbacks. It's sad they weren't able to get Don S. Davis back for this scene where Scully is walked along at a funeral, you assume by her father. But yeah, no, it's really interesting to see these interactions. We meet Bill's pregnant wife, Tara, who will not shut up about being pregnant. She's one of those people who is about to pop and just will not shut up about, oh, I never thought about kids before, but now, oh, I feel this undying love, and it gets a little annoying. Apparently her only dialogue is connected to her pregnancy, to wave it under Scully's face. And, you know, then that's the only reason why Scully relays this information to Maggie. You know, saying she never realised how much she wanted children until she couldn't have it. And yeah, it's just, I just love the family. We got to immediately put this up in S. I love seeing Scully. You know, she's away on holiday, and you know we see this again actually shortly in Chinga, but you know she goes away for Christmas time and immediately is drawn into a case. She just can't help herself. And it's fun to see her working with Detective Kresge and the you know, the PD, San Diego PD kind of thing. And you know, kind of putting the coroner in his place, the medical examiner in his place for missing an injection mark or a toxicology screening and stuff like that. It's fun to see her being the expert. There's just a lot of interesting Scully development. You then have, you know, the social worker come in when Scully wants to adopt Emily. And then it ends with this cliffhanger where you find out that Scully is actually Emily's biological mother, not Melissa. You know, after Bill has been a dick about it, going, look at this picture of Melissa. Does she look pregnant here? Duh, you're just trying to fill a void. And you're like, Bill, what the what? He is all... Pat Skipper does this so well. I don't know if it's amazing or frustrating just how good he is as this just asshole bigger brother. But yeah, no, it's an excellent episode, and it just continues. Without question, we gotta put Emily in S as well. It's no less. It's just as good as Christmas Carol. It's interesting to think that the child originally that they had was a 4-year-old playing Emily. But when it came to this episode, there's a moment where they take Emily to the hospital. And because she's got this fever, and they find this when she's at the care home, kind of social worker home. And she has this fever, and she's found after another call, possibly from Melissa. Actually, I think it was just a dead end. And they go and apparently they take Emily to the hospital because they find this green nodule on the back of her neck, where you would puncture a bounty hunter or a clone in the neck. And it turns out that the child that originally was playing Emily, who they'd filmed Christmas Carol with, she did not want to play when she was in the hospital set. So they instead had to recast to this 6-year-old child who'd been in Millennium, Chris Carter's other series. And then they had to try and reshoot and do inserts for Christmas Carol with this new child. Just the effort that's put there to you know, can you imagine you shoot a whole, you know, for a week or however long, I think they had like 8-day weeks for shooting schedules. To do that and then have to redo all those parts. Thankfully, Emily barely talks in either part. But yeah, that must have been hell on earth. But Mulder finally turns up. Mulder comes into the rescue. It's still very much Scully's story. But it's interesting then how not only are you seeing how this story affects Scully, but how it also affects Mulder. Because Mulder is very much, you know, clearly people are killing the parents and killing people in an effort to stop any interruptions with this child who's a test subject. Who is going to protect... I shouldn't... Because she's called Mulder in to speak for her at this hearing to make it possible for her to adopt Emily. And he's like, I shouldn't be here. Who's going to protect you? And she's like, well, why are you here then? And he's like, because I know stuff. And it turns out, you know, he's got information on the tests and, you know, and stuff like that. But he's there and he goes to this hearing. for the adoption. And it's so funny to see, Maggie, Bill, and Tara come out all together. They've not even gone in individually. They've gone in as the family. And then Mulder goes in separately. While Scully sat there. And he fights for her. He's like, they're all like, oh, we don't think, this, that, and the other. And he's like, look, if she's not able to look after this child, then I don't know who is. And even though every part of him is wanting to protect Scully, and we see afterwards, because we find out, this is where he's like, Dana has known that she can't conceive, and it's because all her ova were taken. And this is a much better way of presenting that information than what happens in Permanum. Now, I like to think that scene in Permanum happens around this time, which then gives us a time frame for that. But yeah, it's interesting to then see when they go back to Scully's house and she's like, how long have you known, and stuff like that. Why didn't you tell me? And he's like, I was trying to protect you. And I kind of miss that frustration and anger she has in Permanum when she finds out. He doesn't tell her here that he's secretly holding on to her ova, apparently it's just in the back of his freezer or something. I don't know. But he doesn't tell her that, but it's good to see that she's, that they're sharing this information, that he's protecting her and it's not right, but she's just like, you should have told me and stuff. And it's interesting to see, as he then goes off, speaks, when Emily is clearly deteriorating health-wise, and Mulder goes to visit this Dr. Calderon, played by Gerard Plunkett, and he just absolutely beats the shit out of Calderon when Calderon doesn't help, and he threatens him with a gun. It's like, you help that little girl, you're just medical rapists and stuff like that. Like I say, as I said before, calling it as it is. So thank you, Scheib and Gilligan of Spotnitz. But yeah, just to see that rage when Scully and anybody connected to Scully is in danger, that rage that's in Mulder, he will protect her. You just know. He would have loved that child. He would have been a father to that child had she been allowed to live. Had she been allowed to live. Except Scully, apparently, of course, is not allowed to have nice things because, as we've seen time and time again, what are they going to do with a child tagging along? Okay, this frustrates me. Because this is the first example of it. It should have been proof when they came to making her pregnant with William, and now with season 11, which never happened. It just, so apparently, Gilligan and Spotnitz said they were trying to figure out what to do with Emily. They wanted her to live. And Gilligan said they got a lot of flack for killing off Emily, but they just didn't know what to do with her. They tried everything, and the only logical answer for them, like just from what to do with her going forward, and just emotionally in a storytelling sense, the only logical answer was for them to kill her off. And yes, it makes sense, but it's just the fact it starts a recurring theme. And again, that's not this episode's fault, but it is frustrating that the only answer logically is to kill her off. And to just, that Scully's motherhood, not only is that taken away from her, but that chance even to adopt this child that she didn't birth. The idea that these children are being grown and then these elderly women are being, used as surrogates. I love all the myth arc stuff that is added in here. We have shapeshifters. We have these old ladies in our nursing home being used as surrogate bodies to birth these children. We have these children in these green goo. And this is a very different, because clones in the past we've seen grown in tanks. So to see these, like, these experimental alien human kind of hybrids, these early Williams, if you will, you know, to see them being birthed, using, you know, DNA and stuff from the mothers, is really fascinating. There's a lot of aspects here that are just so well done. Seeing Scully, you know, she's looking out for Emily. You know, she's investigating and, you know, trying to figure out the best way to do, but it turns out that she might not be actually helping Emily, you know, by cutting off Calderon and stuff like that. But then a clone of Calderon turns up, and Mulder's following that avenue. Again, it's them investigating their own avenues, which makes this a great investigation. And to see the Scully family, you know, in a way that we just, they're so much more apart, you know, especially this early season. We don't really see them. I think this is really the last time we see them, which is sad. I mean, obviously Maggie comes back after, but once the show moves to, started filming in LA, we never see Bill Scully again. Tara is never heard of again. I know this is the season, you know, Emily was born because, came about because when Gillian's pregnant body was shot in those abduction scenes in one breath, and so on, in that trilogy, they were like, oh, you know, she was impregnated. Let's use that. This is a follow-up to that. And as I said, this is very much a Scully-centric season. It's tying up a lot of her threads, especially the abduction arc. We've had the cancer dealt with, and now we've got this. And it's just interesting because, unfortunately, this is the last season where anything has consequence. And consequences that are followed up. Beyond this, from season 6 on, you know, the myth arc, this pretty much, there's a little bit in season 6, but yeah, anything from here on out has no consequence. And there's so much that gets left behind in, and we'll talk more about it when we talk about Patient X and Fight the Future and stuff. But regarding Scully's arc, her everything gets closed up here, and yeah, Bill and Tara just disappear off the face of the earth. So that's really sad that we lose that familial connection, because we just don't have that with Mulder's side, with Mulder's family. So not only do we get to see Mulder's interactions with, like, Maggie, and Bill, this is just an excellent episode. This is an excellent two-parter, emotionally just sapping, excellently directed. I think the first part is directed by Peter Markle, and the second part is Kim Manners, who was the one who had to deal with the unruly child, apparently, and had to do a lot of the reshoots. But yeah, just excellently directed, excellently written, and a lot of emotional stuff. And as frustrating as it is to see Mulder, the White Knight, coming in to rescue when Scully was more than capable, was running that investigation more than capably, it's interesting to see how she handles all that stuff. And it's interesting to see how Mulder is affected by what's going on with Scully. It's just another facet that adds to their partnership. It's just more Mulder and Scully goodness. But moving on, we have got Kitsunegari, which is a sequel to Pusher, credited to Vince Gilligan and Tim Minear. who was actually the story editor on Postmodern Prometheus. And I primarily know from his work on, was it Buffy or Angel? Or both? Whatever. But yeah, but I don't actually think Vince Gilligan had much input here. I'm pretty sure he's only credited because of character created. Apparently, according to Wikipedia, Tim Minear had an idea of something completely different. And then Frank Spotnitz was like, well, why don't you tie it to Robert Modell, who we left him in the hospital, who should have been dead by now. He was dying of a brain tumor, and then Mulder shot him, which nobody lets him forget in this episode, I just want to point out. The doctor where Modell is, and I think it's then Linda Bowman says, you're the one who shot him. It's like, oh my god, that poor man. But yeah, so Tim Minear was asked to put that together and work with Vince Gilligan. But there is so much of the writing here that is not Gilligan. This specifically, the stuff between Mulder and Scully. I don't even know why Mulder and Scully are here. So Skinner is leading up this task force because apparently Modell got better, was put in a psych ward and was getting better, and then escaped. So Skinner calls in Mulder and Scully because obviously they have, investigated this guy before, along with like some ATF SWAT team, whatever, FBI task force. It's very Field Where I Died in that sense. But Mulder's called in because he's, the expert and stuff on this guy, and obviously he's probably the next victim if Modell is out to finish his work, kind of thing. Except then, at every opportunity, both Scully and Skinner are just like, you're too close to this case. Just do not listen to him at all. He figures out Linda Bowman, who is the wife of this lawyer who gets killed by being forced to drink cerulean blue paint, which is then poured over him after also putting, kanji symbols that read Kitsunegari, which means fox hunt, over the walls. He gets killed. Linda Bowman is the wife, and it turns out that actually she gets put in this safe house because they think she might be the next victim. And it turns out she's actually Modell's sister? Half-sister? I can't remember. They got separated in orphanages and stuff, and now possibly Modell is just trying to get back to meet up with her, even though she's possibly been going to the hospital, posing as a nun, visiting him and helping him get better. So they keep Linda Bowman at this safe house, and they're questioning her about, her husband's involvement with Modell and stuff like that. I don't remember whether he was defending Modell or prosecuting him. I can't remember. But Mulder figures out, from what she's saying and stuff like that, he catches on to the fact that it's her, that she's the one doing the killing. So he tells Skinner and Scully, and they're just like, no, Mulder, you're just too close to this case. And you're like, are you actually kidding? This is the profiler here, and you're not. Scully just does nothing. Scully, who, do you remember that beautiful hand holding at the end of Pusher and stuff like that? All the beautiful, this is why I definitely don't think this was a Gilligan script. All she does is stands and scowls the whole way through this episode. No, Mulder, you're wrong. No, you're just too close. No, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Clearly we're looking for Modell. And then when Modell does turn up, he goes to the safe house, and it's just, Skinner finds them, him and Bowman just stood there in the room. And you're like, okay, what was the end game here? And then Modell pretends to pull a gun so Skinner shoots him. And then Bowman kills him. Kills Modell. And you're like, what was even the point? There was so much promise here. I'm sorry. Easily, I've got to put this down. I am going to put this... I'm going to put this in C. I would put this in B. No, sorry. Yeah. If I would put this in B, I would have to move Redux up to A. And I just do not like it that much. I'm going to put this in C. There is so much promise here. This isn't like... you know, this isn't like Postmodern Prometheus or something where there's issues with it, but there's good stuff that bring it up. There is so much promise here. They had Robert Wisden back as Pusher, and he's barely in it. And you're just like, what are his motives? He's like, he corners Mulder and is like, don't play the game. But that's it. It would have been so good to have more Mulder-Pusher interaction. Not here. And it's just like, and all the interaction, and the ending, which should be absolutely upsetting, where you have Scully seemingly kill herself and Mulder running, and then it turns out that it's actually Bowman causing a trick, so that then, you know, hoping that Mulder will shoot Scully by accident. By pointing a gun at what he sees as Bowman, which is actually Scully being, you know, appearing as Bowman. But it's just, one, it feels like a cop-out. It feels like a retread of the excellent Russian roulette scene from Pusher. But also it just feels... It just feels lazy. It's like they didn't know they want to trick Mulder into killing Scully. That makes sense. It feels like, and it is emotionally impactful, don't get me wrong, which I think is why, normally, if you would ask me before this rewatch, I would have just been like, yeah, that's the Pusher Part 2, yeah, put it up in S rank. Pusher's an amazing episode, put this up there. And I normally don't mind it when I watch it. I think out of season 5 episodes, this would be the first one I would go to, and yet, thinking about it, there's just so... And I mean, when Scully's trying to convince Mulder that she's actually Scully, and she's like, your mother is Tina! Your sister... sorry, in the actress who plays Linda, it's hilarious. Your sister is Samantha! And you're just like, okay, much like, say, Dreamland, can we have, like, a code word at this point for people thinking that their partners are other people when actually they're not? The fact that they can't share anything personal. Apparently the only thing Scully knows about Mulder that would get his attention, even though we have proven with Luther Lee Boggs and Roach that they are more than capable of looking up information on these people from the internet. You would think that she would come up with something that only they know, even if it was mentioned in a case or something. It's kind of upsetting that Scully didn't think to say something else. It just would have been nice to have some kind of personal stuff there, and they just don't, which takes away from the scene. It just... The case itself is threadbare. It makes no sense. There are plot holes here a mile wide. And just, I don't get why Scully and Skinner are so... It's not even like... If that's Scully worrying about Mulder's safety and that, then... It's bad. It's... The characterization in that is just awful. Yeah, it's not the worst. Like I say, I will put this on, but... You have to just really not think about it too much to really get much out of it. But from that episode to a far worse one, it's Schizogeny. I will assume that's how you say it. That's how I'm going to say it. We go from an episode that had a lot of promise that it just did not, expand on to just mediocrity. This is another spec script, much in the line of Sanguinarium. It's by writers that don't write for the show. They just provide a script and then it gets... I don't even recognize the name of the director, to be honest. I could be wrong. Maybe they have done other stuff. But yeah, we have trees are dangerous again. And also this show hates teenagers. We have Bobby and Lisa, much in the line of, say, Die Hand verletzt, where it's just they're teenagers who have troubles at home. Bobby is accused of killing his stepdad, I think it is. But he says that Phil was abusive and stuff, and he was just standing up for himself. And then you have Lisa, Bobby's possible girlfriend, or wannabe girlfriend, he wants her to be. And she's having problems at home, and her dad dies. But it turns out it's the trees killing them. And it turns out that actually the parents aren't abusive. One, the teenagers are just kicking out, but also they're seeing this therapist, Karen, whose dad was the abusive one, who died and might have possessed the trees in the local orchard. There's not much to say about this one. I don't feel like... I don't know how Mulder and Scully just coax through. There is really bad. Karen seems to have the personality of her dad. Either she's possessed, or she has some mental health issues that she is then forcing on these teenagers. It is not good representation of mental health issues. The tree thing is silly. The story just generally is not all that interesting. There's a lot of atmosphere. There's this amazing shot where you see this woodsman who just turns up. And saves the day by chopping off Karen's head. And you're like, okay. And he's like, it has ended. And you're like, what? What? Wait, what? So now she's dead, the trees won't be evil? Okay. But there's this amazing shot where Mulder and Scully are checking out this sinkhole thing where the dad died. And there's this shot of the woodsman at the end of this orchard with just like the trees like arching and stuff, and it's beautiful. But yeah, it just feels real. There's not a lot happening. It's all cliched. None of it makes sense. And you have these very home-esque moments where Mulder is throwing innuendos at Scully left, right, and centre. Like climbing up a tree and going, Scully, hey, is this boyish agility turning you on at all? And you're like, okay. For the man who was running away the second Scully brought in a tray of cheese and wine, yeah. It's so random. Easily. It's not the worst. The funniest thing is, this isn't even the worst episode in the whole season. But I got no choice but to put it down in D. It's just so mediocre. So little happens. And you just come away going, what did I just watch? Okay, moving on. Which is what we'll do now, because I have nothing more to say about that, and these videos are long enough as it is. So let's move on to our final episode of this first half. It is Chinga, brought to us by Stephen King and Chris Carter. I'm not clear on how much Stephen King if he just wrote the story and then Chris Carter like worked it into an X-Files episode, that he made it into a script. It doesn't say in the credits story by Stephen King and then, you know, adapted by Chris Carter. It has them both listed as writers. So yeah, I don't know. There's nothing in the making of commentary or anything like that. There's no you know, documentary. There's no commentary on this episode. But it's got all of your Stephen King cliches. It's set in Maine. It's got this old lady, you know, who because it's basically a talking doll, evil doll. It's very inspired by a Twilight Zone episode, where you have this child who might have autism. I'm not quite clear, and the show kind of theorizes that it's possible in passing, but doesn't dwell on it. This child has this doll, but her mother has this ability, some kind of precognitive ability to see people just before they die, even though they're doing it to themselves. The doll is possessed, but it's causing people to hurt themselves. But the mother, Melissa, honestly, Melissas do not have a good rap on this show. This old local woman, you know, bespectacled, religious, God-fearing type, you know, hair pulled back in a tight bun. She, you know, this, oh, she's a witch. Somebody should go see that woman. Get her out of town. You know, honestly, I think she would have drowned Melissa given half the chance. But it's a classic Stephen King staple. You're getting to meet this whole town while Scully goes away on holiday. I don't know why she picked Maine. And considering she was away just recently to see her family, it's interesting to see her get her own time. But again, much like in Christmas Carol Emily, she goes away and immediately gets suckered into this case where again, the Melissa and her daughter Polly and this doll are at this shop, and everybody starts clawing their eyes out because the doll's like, let's play. And this is another episode where apparently, now to be fair, it's a little evil sounding anyway, but this plays the hokey pokey over and over again. I don't remember who sings the version in this, but yeah, it's creepy as all hell. Every time this doll shows up, it just starts playing the hokey pokey. You will be so sick. And of course that song naturally is repetitive anyway. You will be so sick of that song after this episode. But yeah, Scully wanders upon this shopping this shop where these people have clawed their eyes out, and she gets suckered into investigating. She's like, oh, what happened? And then she gets roped in by like the sheriff and his deputy. The sheriff, Bon Sant, played by Larry Musser in his last role in the show, is who seems to have a thing for Scully a little bit of a crush. They sucker her in. They're asking her questions and she's helping out, and she's just like, I'm just on vacation. But as a result, because Mulder's not there, she immediately like takes on Mulder's theorizing. Meanwhile, she calls Mulder for advice, and we get to see how bored Mulder is without Scully there. It's adorable. It's funny. It's just their parts are just really well written, and it's funny because while Scully's not there, Mulder, when she's asking for advice, he's giving the logical answers. You know, have you looked for a pull string on the back of the doll? Have you, you know, what about this? There's this disease and stuff like that. And she's like, and then she's giving up all these, you know, oh, I thought about, and he's like, you probably don't know what you're looking for. And she's like, oh, what, witchcraft, macumba, sigils, this, that, and the other. And Mulder's totally turned on, and it's just like, Scully, marry me. And you're just like, oh my God. It's so fun, the interactions between Mulder and Scully. And again, much like, say, Christmas Carol, just watching Scully go off and doing her own investigation, and doing quite fine without the input of Mulder. But you do have to feel bad for her, just the pestering of this, the sheriff. The fact he turns up at her motel room. We do find out that Mulder did try phoning her at one point during his bored. It is fun, like I say, it is fun watching how bored he is. But we have this session bit where we see Scully in a bubble bath when Mulder tries phoning, and she just like uses her foot to slam the door shut. And Gillian Anderson has a tattoo on her ankle, so they try to cover it up as much as possible with soap suds. But they had to digitally remove the rest of it, so you can't see her tattoo when she uses her leg. But it's just so funny. She gets out of the bath, clearly luxuriating in it, and then she opens the curtains, and then bloody the sheriff is stood there. And you're like, this poor woman. We'll say, though, she could have gone to a much nicer place if she's going to be away on holiday. It did not look like a nice... didn't look much nicer than the places she stays in with Mulder. So, yeah, I'm surprised that she didn't spring to get herself somewhere much nicer. But it's just fun watching her do this investigating. Unfortunately, the story is not original. There's a lot of cliche here. Scully's logic of just putting the doll in the microwave at the end is a little odd. One, how it works, but two, how it doesn't work, because then the doll is in the... why that doll? The doll turns up in the water when another fisherman finds it. And you're just like, why was that not put in evidence? Why? It should be in a police locker somewhere, surely. But no, it's not. And that doesn't make sense. It's because it gives it an open ending. Yeah, except we never come back to it, so what's even the point of having an open ending? It's not original with that stuff, but I just really enjoy the character interactions here. And of course, the scene with Mulder throwing pencils in the ceiling at the end is just perfect. I love that one that just falls on his head. I'd love to know how many takes that took to get that where David Duchovny didn't laugh or whatever. Yeah, I just think it's a fun episode. It's not original. It's not even that great. I can't explain it. I've got no choice but to put it in A. I gotta. It's just that entertaining. I can't explain it. There's just something that when you come back to these episodes, Chinga is easily... Chinga, by the way, so apparently Chinga in Spanish or something means the F word, possibly, or certainly a naughty word. So in England, and I certainly know it was listed on the BBC, it got changed to bung honey in the UK. Bung honey. Just let that sit with you for a moment. Imagine reading the episode titles and just coming to bung honey. I don't even know where that came from. It doesn't seem to have stuck because certainly in the DVD, like the episode list and stuff, it's listed as Chinga, and on the DVDs it's listed as Chinga and stuff like that. Bung honey just didn't seem to stick. I think there was an issue with it, actually, censorship-wise as well. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I heard the story about that. I should have looked it up again before doing this. But, yeah, it's just... Chinga is one of those episodes that you just can't help but be entertained by, that you want to go back to. And I don't know if it's the Mulder Scully calls. I don't know. I feel bad for the actress who plays Melissa. It's so frustrating. She looks like Megan Leach a bit. I don't know if it's the frizzy hair or what, but I keep seeing her and thinking of her as Samantha. It's so distracting. But yeah, I don't feel... There's a lot of good atmosphere here. Scenes where the old lady slits her throat with the broken piece of vinyl record and stuff. And like I say, the hokey pokey is just creepy enough to... It's trying to be a horror episode, but I just don't feel like it meets. If it met the proper, if it really got that horror, I would probably put it up in S, but it just falls short. But yeah, that's the first half of season 5. I'm really looking forward to seeing people's thoughts, especially if you would put stuff in different places. Yeah, I don't want to drag on to this. Video is long enough already, and my throat's getting sore. But yeah, I really want to see people's comments. I don't get notified when people comment all the time. Thankfully now I've gotten into the habit of checking on the YouTube studio, like the comments when it says ones you've not replied to. So I'm getting more aware of comments when they get posted. So please do share your thoughts and stuff. I really look forward to seeing, especially if you think I've been unfair to any of these episodes. I kind of feel, I don't know, I feel a little rough about Kitsunegari, but at the same time, I think it's just, I know in the past, I did the season 1 review short, and I showed a screenshot of the tier list from that season, and I saw I'd put, and I know everybody goes on at me about how mean I was about Die Hand of Valets, and I completely agree. I actually wish I could go back and reorganize it and put that higher up. Maybe not at the top, but a little higher up than I did put it. But I didn't realize, I forgot I'd put Genderbender down in D on season 1. And I'm like, wow, maybe C, but not D. I was just like, wow, I was so not in the mood that day. So unfortunately, how I feel on the day changes. How I feel. I rewatched these episodes 6 months ago. I was hoping to get this list recorded back in December, but then I caught COVID and stuff like that. But yeah, unfortunately, it's taken me this long to do this. So I don't know. Maybe how I'm thinking about all my previous viewings or whatever. I don't know. I know I've loved that episode in the past, but thinking about it now, no, not doing it for me. So yeah, I really look forward to seeing your thoughts. Especially, I would love to hear your thoughts on Kitsunegari, because, we had so few. Pusher is one of only 3 bad guys that came back. And I certainly don't feel this is anywhere near as strong as Tombs or even a Ryson. So, yeah. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on season 5. And yeah, I will see you next week for the second half. Yay! This is going to be a rough one, guys. But I'm going to get so much flack from people, especially Postmodern Prometheus and stuff, the things I said against that one. I'll buckle myself up ready. But yeah, no, I'll see you next week for the second half. Please take care. Stay awesome. And I'll see you somewhere down the line. Bye. And welcome to season 5.
Get him alive if you can, but you get him!
Hey everybody, X-Sketch back with more whatever I'm doing.